The following podcast is an enticing media production.
Where the Nell have you been? Join us for conversation about life, business, and everything in between. Welcome to What the Nell, where we've got stories to tell. Here's your host, Nell Tice.
Welcome back, you guys, to another brand new episode of the What the Nell podcast with yours truly, Nell Tice. You know, there's something that I constantly enforce, and that is my love of repurposing content. And today's episode is going to be a bit different from what you're used to. I decided to pull from the archives the most popular episode of What the Nell ever to exist. This episode garnered thousands of downloads, and I am really excited because this episode was pretty much, I think, a year ago, right at the beginning of season 2. It is my episode with Mr. Ryan Lambert, and the episode in itself is actually titled The Conscious versus Unconscious Mind and Getting Out of Your Comfort Zone with Ryan Lambert. I'm really excited because while this is the most popular episode that What the Nell has actually had, it's wild, and the amount of feedback that I got from this episode was pretty crazy, and I'm really excited for you to hear it. I think it's worth pulling it out of the archives for you to hear it because, you know, I have a whole new onset of audience members over the past year, and it would be a disservice to introduce them to what some of the quality is that we've had here on this podcast. And while every guest and every episode, obviously there are some episodes that I've probably done myself that weren't my favorite, but I have legitimately loved every episode of recording and doing this podcast. And as we get closer to episode 100, I think I'm just feeling a little nostalgic. So I wanted to pull something out that I think you guys really need to hear. And if you haven't heard it, I'm really excited for you. And if you had, well, here's your opportunity to listen to it again. It's pretty motivational, inspirational, and Ryan is a great guest. And I can't wait for you to hear his expertise, his thought processes, and his journey. So it's really cool. And without gabbing on too much, I will say the upcoming episodes that we've got coming out, I'm super, super excited for. Next week, number 99, I'm very excited for, as well as 100 and the series Don't Follow Me with Steve Trott. Really looking forward to another awesome upcoming season of What the Nell. So without further ado, we're going to get into it. And I'm even going to take you back on a little bit of a journey to like the old introduction for What the Nell, the old music, everything. So come along with me on this little nostalgia ride, and I hope that you really like it. So thanks so much for listening, and here is Ryan Lambert.
She is a business owner, best-selling author, and on a mission to find out what the Nell is going on here. Here's your host, Nell Tice.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another brand new episode of the What the Nell podcast with yours truly, Nell Tice. I want to thank you for joining me today to listen to my esteemed guest, who is Mr. Ryan Lambert, who is one of the founding partners of 3 Buckets Wealth Management. He has worked as a financial coach focused on goal achievement for 19 years, which is kind of what's leading us into our discussion today about goals, mindset, conscious versus unconscious mind, and how all of that ties together and why certain things happen and certain things don't happen. So I'm really excited for this conversation. Ryan, thank you so much for joining me on my podcast today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's a topic near and dear to my heart and hopefully to many people, and something we don't hear a lot about. So again, excited to share it with everyone out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, when you had sent over your original bio to be on the podcast, you had mentioned a topic that is near and dear to your heart is the conscious versus unconscious mind. And when I read that, I thought, well, that's really interesting. What does that mean? What does that mean? Because in my mind, I'm always conscious. If I'm unconscious, I'm laying on the floor, passed out somewhere, So what exactly does that mean?
Well, it's a great question where, again, we do kind of engage in conscious thought, obviously. If you think about, what you want to have for dinner tonight or the quintessential, what do we want to have for dinner? And you never can decide that. But honestly, there's so many things that your subconscious mind is doing in your body. And, how many red blood cells are being replaced right now? White blood cells, what's your breathing rate? What should it be? Monitoring all the things that are going on in your body and in your outside world. Our brain takes in up to 2 trillion bits of information per second.
Whoa.
Now, that is what's going on. It only lets in about 200 bits because of what's called the reticular activating system in our subconscious or in our mind. The very primitive part of our mind filters out what it doesn't need to think about and allows us to focus. I'm able to focus on this conversation with you. Now, I'm not thinking about, hey, there's a plant on the table. It's in a ceramic colored terracotta pot that seems a little dry. Now, of course, that information is coming into my brain, but my brain's like, nope, that's not important right now. Don't think about that. And a great example I like to think of the way to think about that system is, what kind of car do you have actually now?
I have a Honda CRV.
Okay. Now,
I don't love it, by the way.
No, but you don't have to like it or love it. But here's the thing is when you first got that Honda CRV and you first drove out the lot, what did you notice that you hadn't noticed on the road before that? Probably.
That's a good question. I didn't really notice how, this is going to sound weird, but how it felt to drive it off the lot. And this is a little bit of a different situation because we had actually picked up this vehicle without driving it before because it was a pandemic thing and there were no exceptional, closely related vehicles to drive. Yeah. So I noticed how different it felt because this was the first SUV that I've ever had. So I was up higher.
Okay. Well, in another thing you might just visually notice is, wow, there seems to be a lot of CRVs out here. There seems to be a lot of Honda CRVs. It's one of these things where our brain kind of didn't need to think about that. So before you owned a CRV, it didn't think to look for CRVs. But the minute you have a CRV, generally speaking, you'd actually look around and say, wow, there seems to be a lot of CRVs on the road. And again, you're telling your brain what to begin noticing, or this is a bit of information to not disregard at the time.
Yeah.
So again, that's kind of a little kind of trivial thing with our brain and how it works. But that subconscious thing is really tied to it because what happens is so much of this input that it's getting, these, trillions of bits of information are negative. The news, what's happening in the stock market,
right?
What's happening in Ukraine, right? So a lot of what we're getting, these bits of information that we're electing to see because we're watching the news and paying attention to it, are really negatively impacting us in our subconscious in kind of setting a tone, if you will, because what you basically think of or set your reticular activating system on, you're going to see more of.
Right.
So if you think the world is going to hell and crap, guess what you're going to see all around you?
Examples going to hell and crap.
It's also kind of this thing called confirmation bias that we have, where we basically seek out things that confirm our beliefs. We don't seek out things that, look at the different. So if you love Trump, you're going to look for things that are pro-Trump. If you hate Trump, you're going to look at every news source that is anti-Trump. You're not typically going to look for the opposite, right?
Yeah.
So
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I remember growing up, I don't know if this was just a woman versus men thing, but I remember my mother always commenting about the way that certain things that my dad listens to when she would speak. And she would always say, oh, it's that selective hearing you've got. So is that kind of, validating that we have selective hearing? And it's not just men?
It's not just men, it's a human thing. because we're waiting to hear the thing we're trying to hear. And, a prime example is you could be in a room full of 400 people. If you hear somebody yell out Nell, your head is going to snap around no matter what conversation you're in with whoever it is, because you've been trained to listen for your name. And it is the number one sound that we enjoy hearing the most in our own individual human language, our own name. It is most recognized sound.
I mean, it makes sense.
But it's kind of funny because the latest presentation I did was I talked about 3 buckets, and the kind of the funny part is that my financial practice is called 3 buckets, but there's the other 3. I think I would call them the 3 kind of golden buckets, and really the way to think about it, and it's kind of a little bit harder without a visual, is I'm gonna ask you a question. So bucket 1. So bucket 1, Nell, is for everything in your life that you completely 100% control and 100% influence. So what is something you would say is in bucket 1?
My work that I produce.
Your work that you produce. I agree. That's in bucket 1. What else?
What I eat and when I eat every day.
What and when you eat. Perfect. That's another example. Give me another one.
Whether or not I exercise.
Okay, great. So let's talk about this. So you said exercise, your diet, what you eat, your work and what you produce. What all 3 of those things have in common? What are they related to?
Me.
You. You are the thing in bucket 1. You are the only thing in bucket 1.
Oof.
Right.
That hits different.
Bucket 2. Now we're going to talk about things that you can't control for sure, but you can influence. So give me some ideas of things that are in, bucket 2. You can't control, but you can influence it.
Something relating to social media, whether or not it reaches people.
Okay. Well, yeah, absolutely. Your impact kind of in social media. Correct. That's one thing. What else would you say is an example of something?
Using a product and showing someone how to use it.
Okay. Yep. People, other people outside of yourself.
Yeah.
You're married, correct?
Yes.
Your husband, you can influence, you can't control.
True. I try to control, but that doesn't work.
No, not usually, not for long. Pets, as I have to remind myself, are pets. How well your car runs, if you maintain it or not. It's kind of bucket 2, but it's also kind of bucket 1. You remembering to go do that.
Right.
All right. So then let's talk about bucket 3. Bucket 3 are things in our life we have 0 influence and 0 control over. So what is an example of a bucket 3 item?
People's opinions.
People's opinions. Absolutely. What else?
Oof.
Even more broadly.
War,
the weather.
Yeah.
Politics for the most part after you cast your vote.
Other people's actions.
The temperature of the ocean. Literally. Everything, right? So here's the idea is it's mostly things, again, we can't control it, we can't influence it. So now let's think about ourselves and our time. So bucket 1, what % of your time do you think you should spend on kind of bucket 1 items, being yourself? What % out of 100 would you say was bucket 1?
Maybe 60%.
60. Okay.
Does that sound egotistical?
No. So that's, I'm just curious. So bucket 2, what do you think for bucket 2?
Well, ideally 40%.
Okay. So ideally 40. So that 0%'s in that bucket 3.
So
good. I'm going to go with you got 1 out of 3.
Oh, no.
If you do that as a baseball player, you're in the Hall of Fame. So
I could deal with that. I could.
The bucket 3 should be 0, right? I mean, again, you don't influence, can't control.
Right.
Ideally, bucket 2 should be 10 to 20. Bucket 1 should be 80 to 90.
Okay.
So think of it this way. You've been on an airplane. I'm going to go out on a limb.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
We've all heard the speech at the beginning. So in an event, there's an emergency and the oxygen masks drop. What are you supposed to do if you have people around you or children? You're supposed to do what?
You're supposed to put yours on first before helping others.
Because if you're not good, you can't help anybody else.
You're right.
So it's the same kind of mentality. Now, the reality of it is most people spend 0 to 10% on bucket 1, about 50% on bucket 2, and 40 to 50% of their time thinking about bucket 3 items.
Oof. That number kind of gives me chills.
Yeah. It really, but it's also very eye-opening as to, wow, why? Why would we spend so much time thinking about bucket three things?
Exactly. That was going to be my next question. Why is that? Why is it so unbalanced?
Well, think of a bucket three. If you complain about it and you're around the water cooler complaining about something that's outside of your control, can you be wrong?
Mm,
Can you fail?
yeah.
And I think so many people have an innate fear of failing that they like to talk about things that they can't control or almost victimized by because, again, it gives you something to talk about, but you can't be wrong and you can't mess it up.
You can't be held accountable.
Correct.
Hmm.
You can't. It's part of that getting out of your comfort zone. I mean, it's comfortable to talk about things that you can't control.
Absolutely.
And so it kind of goes into that, again, that goal achieving kind of thing, where if you don't put it out there that you want to achieve it, you can't not achieve it. You can't fake it. You can't not do it.
Right. Right. So, I mean, I'm generally interested in why. So 0 to 10%, you said for the first bucket.
Yeah.
Why do you think? So, do you think it's because of the fear of failure that people don't spend more time on themselves?
Well, here's the thing is we're not taught to. We're actually taught to that's selfish. You even said it yourself. You said that's selfish. You're self-centered. Nobody ever says, "Oh my God, you love yourself. That's fantastic." Now, in maybe in a Hallmark movie, we'll hear you need to love yourself first.
You mean at the snowy cabin where they're all locked in and can't get out until
Same snowy cabin every time, right?
Right.
They're in a snow globe, right? It's just one of those things where we're again taught that, and that goes back to the subconscious thing.
Mm-hmm.
Most things we do, we're not thinking about ourselves consciously. We're told by somebody at some point not to be self-centered, and that recording is playing every day in your brain.
Right.
Now you're not aware of it. So if you were aware of it, much like part of this broadcast, you could record over it.
Right.
But if you're not aware it's playing and it's just playing and playing and playing, you don't even know that you're being run by it. And guess what? Guess when we get most of this programming of all of these subconscious programs that are just running by age 7.
7. So this isn't necessarily one of those things where we can always blame our education system. Because a lot of times before the age of 7, you spend the majority of time at your home.
Correct.
So how can we shift the perspective of 0 to 10% being the norm to the 80 to 90%?
Part of what I like to say and part of my tagline is we need to begin to think about what we think about. We don't. We just go, but we don't think about what we're thinking about. And almost more importantly, how we're feeling.
Very true.
Because a lot of these are programs that are run and they're stimulated by something happening. Now, just to give you an idea, there's a really old part of our brain called the amygdala, very basal, very, very, reptilian almost in nature. And something happens to you. You have kids? No, you don't have kids, but let's say somebody called and said, my God, there's been something happen. Your husband's been in an accident. What just triggered for you? An emotional response, correct?
Correct.
Now that's going to hit your amygdala in 12 milliseconds. Your amygdala, your alarm center is going to go off. And it's going to say, we need cortisol, we need adrenaline, we need all of these things from your hormones are going to be produced from your adrenal glands and whatnot, and dump it into your bloodstream to get you ready for fight or flight. Right now, do you think that's going to help the way you think about something, or are you going to be thinking clearly if that happens?
No, I don't think so.
You're not. And you know why? Because part of what fight or flight is it's going to shut down blood flow to your extremities because it wants to make sure if you get cut that you don't bleed to death. It's going to shut. One of your extremities is your brain. And the prefrontal cortex, the most logical part of your brain, is actually going to have blood flow reduced to it. So you can't think clearly. Because it only took 12 milliseconds for it to hit your amygdala. It takes 40 milliseconds to get to your prefrontal cortex. which is 3.5 times slower.
Wow.
So if you have that emotion and you don't think and you just do what your brain tells you to and just go, you're probably not going to make the best decisions. And it doesn't know if you're about to get eaten by a dinosaur or the stock market dropped. Right. It just takes an input as I got emotional, go.
Yeah.
Right?
Right, exactly.
And I mean, I can tell you, the stock market, 2008, the stock market drops tremendously. You feel like I need to get out. I need to stop the bleeding. Now, are you bleeding? No. Figuratively, people felt like they were bleeding. Sure. And they wanted to do something. Their brain was telling them, you have to do something. Now, the something is to call their advisor and say, get me out. I can't take it anymore. And there's so many examples of people that have done that. Now, is that the right time to do something? Should we sell when things are low or sell when they're high?
I would say low.
Well, no, you want to sell when they're high.
Oh, buy when they're low.
Yeah, exactly. No, exactly. Which is the opposite of what people are feeling that they want to do. They're feeling because it's low that they want to sell, which is the opposite of what they should do. But guess what? If they let it take over, they're going to do that.
Yeah.
And then what's going to happen? The market's going to go up. We're going to get excited, another emotion, and the prices are now high. And we're going to do what? Buy back in. So we're going to buy, we're going to sell low and buy high. And if and it's our primitive brain that doesn't realize that financial and a lot of the decisions we make now are not so time sensitive that it's life or death, but it doesn't know that.
Really interesting. And now I got to know, how did this become a passion of yours to sort of correlate the human aspect into the financial aspect for what you do now, for instance?
Well, it's really because here's the interesting thing. If you were to say to somebody, and we sit down and I look at what you're doing and you're not on pace to accomplish your goals. And if I were to say, do you know what you need to do? Yeah, I need to save more money. Great. So you know what you need to do. Why aren't you doing it?
Right.
Right. So the whole idea is it's not finding out what you need to do different, because everybody knows that. And that's not really helpful. The helpful thing is, in what I do, people are like, well, so you manage stocks and bonds. I'm like, no, that's not what I do, because that doesn't matter. That's talking about the tool. That's like if your car doesn't run and the mechanic tells you all about the tools and what the tools do. You really don't care. Right. And every mechanic's got the same toolbox. But the whole idea is trying to figure out, okay, great, which tool do I need to use to help you achieve what it is you're trying to achieve? And a lot of times the people don't even know what they're trying to achieve, first of all. And then second of all, even if they know what they're trying to achieve, it comes down to our emotional intelligence, our accountability. All these other things are going to make a huge impact on whether we achieve that goal. But nobody's talking to them about that. And then they're bombarded in society by, how many car ads did you hear on your drive into work in the morning? Right. So it's in there. You're hearing it. If you can hear it, it does affect you some way, shape, or form. So it's just one of these things where my biggest job I found over the years, the more I thought about it, was trying to help people change their behavior, not pick good investments. Right. Because it doesn't make a difference at the end of the day what the investment is. Their behavior is the thing that's going to dictate whether they're successful or not.
That's interesting. So, you're basically, what you're saying is the reason why people aren't accomplishing their goals is because your goals go into that first bucket, and we're taught not to focus on that first bucket.
Right.
Wow. It's wildly interesting to me, because when you start delving into the behind the scenes aspects of why these things are happening or why they're not happening, it really causes you to think. We always talk about, and it goes for anybody posting on social media, let's talk about your goals, or in your mastermind meetings, let's talk about the goals. What do you need to do to get to your goals? We can talk about it all day long, but are we actually taking those steps to get closer to our goals? And I know from personal experience that, I can have the goal sheet listed out. I can have what I need to do every single day to get to that goal by the end of the month. But if I don't take the action, I'm not going to reach that goal. And there's a fear there of sometimes not just failure, but success. So when you're afraid of success, I attribute that to almost like a, well, what happens now type feeling. So, when let's just say you're getting married, you have the wedding, and there's that letdown, that feeling after the wedding of, well, I have so much time now. I'm not planning this big event. What now? What's next? So do you think that plays a part into it too? Like a fear of success?
It's funny. I think you say fear of success. I think it's even more rudimentary where it's fear of change.
Okay.
As humans, let me ask you this. When I don't know, if you ever get really sick, is there a certain movie you want to watch every time you feel like really sick or like just...
My millennial self really wishes that The Price is Right was still on, because that was the go-to,
Yeah. It's funny. A lot of times when you think of it, when you do have kids, you find, you'll say, hey, what do you want to watch? They want to watch the same movie every time. Why?
It's comfortable.
Because they know what comes next. And we're really hardwired to be that way. We want to know what comes next. We again, get nervous when things change. I one time sat down with a person, initial meeting, and talked to them about our approach and what we do. And they were like, oh my God, that's amazing. But no, I'm going to stay with my guy, even though they just told me this person doesn't do any of these things that they thought were really helpful. I'm like, do you mind me asking why? They're like, we're just afraid. We know what to expect with them. Even though this sounds better, we just don't know what to expect. Even though we think it could be better, we're just going to stay where we are.
Right.
Which was so sad to hear somebody say that. It was like, it's almost like defeat or just giving up. And I'm like, wow. Like it was just, it hit me. I was like so bummed.
Yeah. That's a shame. That is a shame. I mean, it kind of almost sounds like the just a very lighthearted version of that, with Google and our ability to seek out information these days. I attribute this to, if I'm going to an event at a stadium or somewhere, I need to know what the parking situation's like before I go, right?
Yeah, I get you.
So, we have all of these resources, and I'm thinking, I don't know, maybe this is why, but we have all of these resources so that we can do these things, because as humans, we are afraid of what comes next if we don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, no, it does. And as we get older, I think it only amplifies the fear of that change. And again, something I work with everybody on, especially my own kids, is like, I've been telling them forever, they can tell you, what's the only certainty in life? And everybody's like, death and taxes. I'm like, well, yeah, but and change. Change is a guarantee. And it doesn't mean bad, though.
No.
I think so much of the connotation, though, people immediately, if I say things are going to change, they're like, oh no, what's coming up? Not, oh great, I can't wait for change to happen. It's the opposite. It's like, oh no. And I'm like, well, doesn't mean it's bad. Again, we can have, I think, what was it? Woody Allen said, 80% of life isn't what happens, but your reaction to it.
So true.
So the idea is, I was going to go, my first time I went skydiving, right? I was excited. I'm excited. I'm driving down there. And then I would feel it turn to what I considered fear. But then I would think about it and kind of be like, this is going to be exciting. And so fear and excitement are the exact same thing. It's just your opinion of it. It's the same stimulus. I'm going to go skydiving. I can be really afraid I'm going to go skydiving, or I can be really excited. I can't wait to go see what it's going to be. It's the same stimulus. It's how you interpret it and what you look at it as.
Right.
So many things in life are that exact thing.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I specifically have a friend who loves skydiving. Absolutely loves it. I'm pretty terrified of it. But it's the same thing. It is just an opinion. It truly is.
Yeah,
wow.
He's excited. You're scared. It's the same potential outcome.
Right. So how can people start to shift their mindset on their opinions of what fear and excitement are?
I think part of it is just, again, thinking about, how you feel. Again, remember those feelings hit us first. And I think part of it is just taking a second when you have a feeling to recognize, okay, what am I feeling? And is this kind of like logical, and what I'm feeling logical? And I think the key thing here is being, they would call it reflective, reflecting on it versus reflexive, and just doing our reflex action and just how we feel. Really just that pause, because what'll happen is the great part about our brain is we have all these programs. It sounds kind of like, a little sad. Oh man, my brain is messed up and I can't fix it. But there's a miracle. It's called neuroplasticity, meaning our brains are moldable and can be changed, and these new pathways can be created in the brain if we begin to think differently and we stop just doing exactly what we've always done. So it can be done, but it's going to take conscious thought to change that subconscious. But it can be done. It just takes effort. And the first thing is literally just awareness, because it's just all happening automatically. First thing you got to do is basically hit pause and try to be aware of what's going on. And I like to say our life is like the movie The Matrix. We've seen it, right? Now, here's the bad news. The bad news is, just so you know, Nell, you're in the Matrix.
Man, I was hoping you weren't going to say that.
Let me tell you the good news, though. The good news is you're also the programmer of the Matrix.
I like that.
So everything that happens to you starts in your brain. Whatever you think and hear will end up materializing outside somewhere. I'm not the savant that came up with this. You can look at, Ralph Waldo Emerson, a man or woman is what they think about all day long. You can get biblical. The Lord helps those who help themselves. Doesn't say help those who help others help themselves. Right. There's just all sorts of different examples all through history of these things that we should be doing and how we should be helping ourselves or taking care of ourselves. But somehow societally, if that's a word, we're told not to. Yeah, we're told not to. No, it's selfish. Don't take care of you. You only help other people. Only help other people. And great. Yeah, we want to help other people. Don't get me wrong. But a lot of times the way to help people is by becoming the best you that you can to inspire other people. Like by age 7, like you said, we learn it from what we see. Who we see most? Our parents. And now probably an iPad, unfortunately. I see 2-year-olds being babysat by, here's an iPad, just be quiet in the corner. So that could
be a whole other podcast.
Seriously. And that's going to program that iPad's going to program your child. And what ads pop up that they happen to see and don't even think that they're seeing, but they're seeing because they're just sponges, and their brain, because it wants to be efficient and or lazy, is like, how fast can I set up these shortcuts? And it doesn't matter what the shortcut is, it's going to set it up. So you're not a car person, I'm guessing.
No. Right.
So if you and I sat down, let me just give you an example. So you and I sit down and you're like, Ryan, I think I'm going to get a car in the next month or so. And I'm like, oh man, now Toyotas are the best. Here's why Toyota is the best. Blah, 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 blah. Great. A week later, you're talking to a friend and they're like, I think I'm going to get a car. And you're going to say, you know what? Toyotas are the best. You're not going to, you might not even say a friend told me. You're just going to start saying it like it's your opinion, because your brain took that and said, you know what? I don't want to have to think about that. That's stupid. Boop, that's a shortcut. So every time I hear something about a car, boop, Toyota's the best car.
Oof.
It runs with it. Yeah, exactly. And how many of those filters do we have running in our brains that we're just not aware of?
Jeez.
So your brain will always sacrifice accuracy for speed.
Yeah.
And
it's how rumors are spread.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's that primitive part of our brain. It wants you to be quick. It doesn't necessarily need to be the most accurate, but it needs you to be fast. So that's what it's always focused on, unless you consciously slow it down.
Right.
Which is effortful, which it doesn't like to do. It wants to take the easy, quick, path.
So much valuable information. And things that, one of the best parts that I think about podcasting is that I'm really lucky in the sense that I get to have all of these conversations, different conversations with different people, and learn their thoughts and all of everything that comes along with it. And, usually when I get off these episodes, it really causes me to think about that conversation that I just had. And I'm glad that I'm able to do that. I'm putting myself in that position to be able to do that. So what you're saying about, pausing to think about how we feel about something, how we react to something, is really important, because I consider what I'm doing, podcasting, what other people are doing, is enriching. It really is. And I think you're right. I think that a lot of time, and we always talk about the goals and everything, and I touched on this earlier, but we never really talk about why they're not being accomplished, why we are acting the way we're acting.
Yeah, and it's funny you use the word why several times, and one of the people I think has been impactful to me is Simon Sinek with his book, Start With Why. And the why is the important thing, and I think a lot of folks don't really know their why, and why they're doing what they're doing, whether that be in career or anything else. And here's the thing, and I tell people this all the time: you're either working your plan or you're working in part of somebody else's plan.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as again, static. You're either part of somebody else's idea and plan, or you're doing something to create something.
Yeah.
I moved to Tucson, Arizona a year and a half ago. No need to. It was a comfort zone thing where I was like, I'm kind of comfortable with what I'm doing. It's kind of like I could almost be doing this, subconsciously a bit on autopilot. And I'm like, I'm not growing. If I feel like that, I'm definitely not growing. And I, wanted to challenge myself because, again, we didn't know anybody in Tucson. We'd never even visited Tucson. And it was like, this is going to be a real test, a real challenge. And again, it will give me something to constantly think and work toward.
Yeah.
But I think few people do that. I think people somehow feel like if I get to a point where there's no change, that's a win, or that's how I know I've arrived. And I'm like, that's the furthest thing from the truth.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really interesting. All right. So I got to ask last question. Why Tucson?
Well, it's funny. So one of my business partners, he would come out here and he would be on like a Teams meeting with me, and I'd be looking in the background, these beautiful mountains, and it's sunny, and he's in like a polo shirt, and it's February. Yeah.
That does something for the brain.
Yeah. And I'm sitting upstate New York, freezing my butt off, thinking about how many minutes I got to start my car in advance to have it thaw the ice off of it. And it's funny because I thought I needed to be there physically. Right. So COVID hits, and most of my clients are in their mid 60s or older. So we had to show them how to use technology. And so we had to show them how to use Teams and what is a Microsoft Teams and all that good stuff. And so let's fast forward a year and a half later, we're starting to see people back in the office, and we're setting up meetings with folks, and we're like, yeah, come back in the office. And they're coming back and they're calling. They're like, well, can't we just do the thing on the computer again? I'm like, what? I thought you physically needed me here. You know what I mean? And this is just like a Band-Aid. And now they're like, no, we can just do it that way because they didn't feel like driving anyway. And I'm like, well, hell, I don't have to physically be here. Why am I here? Just because I was physically born here?
Right.
Doesn't mean I have to die here in the same geographic area.
Right.
I'm like, and then it made me think about, geez, if I could live somewhere else, where would I live? And I remember, again, watching those videos where Mark would be out here, and I'm like, that looks really cool. And I'd been to Arizona one other time years before, and I'm like, let's do it. And, my wife's a PA. Physician assistant, so she can do what she does anywhere. So she's like, hell, I mean, obviously there's no shortage in healthcare. Let's do it.
Excellent.
So
Love that.
Got uncomfortable. And, again, still kind of uncomfortable. Again, still getting to try to meet people and whatnot, but getting more comfortable by the day and
getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. That's something I've given some speeches about.
it's a key thing, I think, that again, people think the goal is to be comfortable. I'm like, not really.
No, it's to keep going, to keep growing.
Yeah.
So, Awesome. Ryan, thank you for all of this amazing knowledge and thoughts and everything that I hope that people will take from this and implement in their own lives. But before we go, tell people how they can connect with you and your business.
Yeah. So, I mean, the business, the way to connect, 3bucketswealth.com is our website. People can certainly reach out to me. I'm actually, as crazy as this sound, happy to give out my cell number.
Whoa. I mean, that's totally up to you.
518-441-2054. And happy to talk with people really about these kind of topics. I've really kind of looking to do more kind of presentations or motivational speaking, if you will, on the topic. So
awesome.
Yeah, I've been connecting with folks who have companies or small companies or part of bigger organizations that have been reaching out to me to come talk to the organization. So it's very exciting. It's very fun.
That is very exciting. Well, listeners, you've heard that. If you have a business, small business organization that you could use Ryan's help in, reach out to him. He just gave you his cell phone number, and I will put that in the description to the episode. How many times have you had to change your number?
Yeah, never.
That's good.
I don't have any groupies yet. I'm waiting for groupies, but I don't have any groupies.
Yeah. Well, just you wait. You start getting on more stages, that may change.
That's right.
Awesome. Well, Ryan, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate all your insight.
No problem, Nell. Thank you so much for having me. And like I said, I'm just happy to spread the word.
Absolutely. All right, you guys, thank you so much for listening today. And as always, I will catch you on the next one.